In late 2024, analysts inside Meta produced an estimate that should have been impossible to ignore. Roughly 10% of the company's annual revenue, about $16 billion, could be connected to advertisements for scams and prohibited goods. Another internal document estimated that Facebook and Instagram users were being shown 15 billion higher-risk scam ads every day. Meta says the estimate was rough, overly broad, and included legitimate advertising. It also says fraud damages users, honest businesses, and Meta itself. Yet the records described a company that could identify suspicious advertisers, calculate the revenue attached to them, and measure the cost of removing them. For millions of people, the issue was not theoretical. A convincing investment ad, a stolen identity, or a false government offer could erase savings accumulated over decades. The question was no longer whether criminals had entered Meta's advertising system. It was what the company did after its own systems warned that they might be there. Meta stood at the center of a commercial empire built on attention. In 2024, the company reported about $164.5 billion in total revenue. More than $160 billion came from advertising. That money supported Facebook, Instagram, Messenger, and WhatsApp, while helping finance Meta's expansion into artificial intelligence and data centers. The business depended on a simple exchange. Users received services without paying a subscription. Advertisers paid for access to those users, and Meta used behavioral information to decide which advertisement each person was most likely to notice. For legitimate companies, it was one of the most efficient marketing systems ever created. For criminals, the same system offered scale, speed, and the appearance of legitimacy. A fraudulent offer could appear between family photographs, community updates, and familiar brands, borrowing trust from the platform around it. The strength of Meta's advertising machine came from automation. A business could upload an image, write a few lines, choose a budget, and allow the platform to locate potential customers. Advertisers competed in rapid auctions, but payment alone did not determine the winner. Meta also estimated which advertisement would produce attention, clicks, inquiries, or purchases. The system learned from behavior. Someone who paused over retirement advice might receive more financial advertising. A click on a job offer could produce more employment ads. This made advertising more useful and profitable. It also created a weakness. The system could recognize that a person responded to a subject without understanding why. Someone might click a suspicious investment ad because it looked convincing, money was tight, or they wanted to investigate it. To the delivery system, that click could still resemble interest. The technology did not need to understand financial pressure. It only needed to predict response. By 2022, Meta's own teams were documenting fraud at industrial scale. One internal record described more than 100,000 accounts pretending to be American military personnel deployed abroad. Those accounts were sending millions of messages each week, often building emotional trust before asking for money. Other scams impersonated celebrities, major companies, physicians, and government programs. Another document described limited investment in automated scam detection and treated scam advertising as a relatively low-severity user experience problem. That classification mattered because companies allocate staff, computing power, and executive attention according to priority. Before we go further, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss any of our upcoming documentaries. The warning signs were clear, but reporters were about to learn how little one warning could achieve. Meta's workforce reductions added pressure. A planning document for early 2023 said the team handling certain advertiser complaints involving brand rights had been eliminated. Safety employees were told to conserve computing resources while the company directed investment toward other priorities. Meta later said it expanded scam ad staffing, but documents from that period showed teams struggling to maintain operations. Internal safety staff estimated that users were filing about 100,000 valid reports each week involving fraudulent messages. According to the document, approximately 96% were ignored or incorrectly rejected. The improvement target was modest, eventually dismissed no more than 3/4 of valid reports. A report button gave users the impression that someone would examine the danger. Internally, Scale had turned individual warnings into a cue the system frequently failed to recognize. In 2024, That failure became personal for a Canadian military recruiter whose identity has been changed here to Claire. She woke to find herself locked out of Facebook. Her account displayed a false employment badge and claims of cryptocurrency certification. The hijacked profile began telling friends that she had earned enough money to purchase land and wanted to share the opportunity. Claire reported the account repeatedly. Her supervisor sought help from law enforcement, and friends reported it as well. Weeks passed. A former colleague, whom we will call David, believed he was communicating with a trusted professional he had known for years. He invested 40,000 Canadian dollars. By the time he contacted Claire, the scammers had converted her reputation into a sales tool. Claire estimated that more than 100 reports were made before the profile was removed, and at least 4 other military colleagues were reportedly defrauded. Police traced part of the stolen money through overseas bank accounts, where recovery was considered difficult or impossible. David carried the financial loss. Claire carried the knowledge that people had been harmed because they trusted her name. Meta declined to comment to Reuters on that specific account and its victims. The case involved an unpaid scam, but it revealed the same structural problem. Detection, reporting, and removal were not moving at the speed of the criminals. A December 2024 presentation estimated that users were exposed to 22 billion unpaid scam attempts every day, in addition to 15 billion higher-risk paid advertisements. Those were internal estimates, not audited measurements, but they showed Meta quantifying an enormous problem. The next question was harder. Once an advertiser entered the paid system and appeared suspicious, how certain did Meta need to be before refusing the money? According to documents reviewed by Reuters, Meta's automated systems assigned advertisers a probability of fraud. Automatic removal generally required at least 95% confidence. That threshold can sound responsible. Mistakenly removing lawful businesses can destroy livelihoods, invite claims, and weaken advertiser confidence. Criminals also imitate legitimate companies, making certainty difficult. But the threshold created a large area between innocence and near certainty. An advertiser could display strong warning signs without crossing the level required for immediate removal. Meta disputes that this amounted to tolerating fraud and says its systems use many enforcement signals. Still, the process did not always produce a simple approval or rejection. Suspicion could change how an advertiser was treated while allowing the advertisements to continue. That distinction became central because Meta's solution did more than manage risk. It also changed the price the advertiser paid. The approach was known internally as a penalty bid. Under the reported policy, advertisers considered likely scammers, but falling below the removal threshold, had to pay more to win an ad auction. Meta said the goal was deterrence. Higher costs would make suspicious advertisers less competitive and expose fewer users. The company said testing later showed fewer scam reports and a slight decline in overall advertising revenue. Yet the conflict was clear. When a suspicious advertisement still won the auction, Meta collected a higher price. Imagine a shopping center discovering that one tenant may be cheating customers. Instead of closing the store immediately, the landlord raises the rent while continuing to investigate. The higher rent may force the tenant out, but the landlord still receives payment. The comparison does not establish illegal conduct. It explains why a system designed to punish suspicious advertisers could also preserve part of the revenue they generated. Other rules added to the concern. A 2024 document said a small advertiser could receive at least 8 financial fraud strikes before being blocked. Some high-value accounts could accumulate more than 500 strikes, according to records reviewed by Reuters. For campaigns removed during 2025, had reportedly generated a combined $67 million in monthly advertising revenue. Employees circulated a weekly report naming the advertiser with the most scam complaints. Reuters later checked 5 accounts included in one report and found 2 still active more than 6 months later. Meta removed them after Reuters raised the issue. None of this proves that every strike represented a confirmed crime. Systems make errors, complaints can be malicious, and large advertisers may run thousands of campaigns. But the numbers revealed a policy choice. Repeated suspicion did not always lead quickly to exclusion, while users carried the consequences of delay. Personalization created another risk. The internal documents said users who clicked scam advertisements were likely to receive more similar ads because the system interpreted the click as interest. This did not mean Meta deliberately identified people as easy victims. It meant the advertising engine repeated what produced engagement. A retiree researching a false investment might be surrounded by additional promises. A job seeker responding to one questionable listing might receive more. Earlier academic research found that older users and minority groups were disproportionately exposed to problematic Facebook advertising, with delivery algorithms contributing even when advertisers used limited targeting. The point was not motive. Optimization could increase harm without a fresh human decision. Once the machine learned that a person responded, the next advertisement required no executive approval. Late in 2024, Meta's internal assessment moved beyond individual accounts and attempted to value the entire problem. One projection estimated that advertisements for scams and prohibited goods could account for 10.1% of company revenue. Reuters applied it to Meta's results and calculated roughly $16 billion. Meta said the estimate was rough, overly inclusive, and captured many legitimate advertisements. It said the true figure was lower, although it did not provide Reuters with an updated number. A separate internal estimate placed annual revenue from higher-risk scam ads at about $7 billion. Another document anticipated possible regulatory penalties of up to $1 billion. The comparison was damaging because Meta reportedly estimated that the higher legal risk portion of scam advertising produced about $3.5 billion every 6 months. Under that calculation, the disputed revenue could exceed the expected cost of a settlement. A fine might punish the company without changing the economics. Documents also described limits around enforcement's financial effect. A February 2025 record said a team examining questionable advertisers was expected not to take actions costing more than 0.15% of Meta's total revenue during the first half of that year. A manager referred to revenue guardrails. Meta said the figure came from a projection and was not a fixed ceiling on safety work. In October 2024, executives had presented Meta's chief executive with what the records called a moderate approach. Reported targets would reduce the estimated share of revenue connected to scams, illegal gambling, and prohibited products from 10.1% in 2024 to 7.3% by the end of 2025, then 6% in 2026, and 5.8% in 2027. A gradual reduction could protect forecasts and avoid mistakes. It also meant continued exposure while the percentage declined. By May 2025, a presentation by Meta's safety staff reportedly estimated that the company's platforms were involved in 1/3 of successful scams in the United States. That was an internal estimate, not a government measurement. An April review of online communities used by fraudsters concluded that advertising scams was easier on Meta's platforms than on Google, although the document did not explain the full basis for the comparison. Meta was also spending heavily on artificial intelligence and infrastructure funded by advertising. This does not prove executives protected scam revenue for that purpose. The documents establish no such motive. They do show why any major reduction in advertising income mattered. Meta's public filings acknowledged that stronger action against advertisements and marketers violating its policies reduced revenue and could have a material financial effect. Better enforcement protected users, but it also removed paying customers. On November 6, 2025, Reuters published its investigation, drawing from documents produced between 2021 and 2025 across Meta's finance, engineering, lobbying, and safety divisions. Meta responded that the selection distorted its overall work and repeated that the 10.1% estimate was too broad. The company said user reports of scam ads had fallen by 58% over 18 months, and that it had removed more than 134 million scam ads during 2025 by that point. Both claims could be true. Meta could remove an enormous volume while still missing an enormous volume. The meaningful questions were what proportion remained, how quickly it was removed, and whether policy created financial reasons to tolerate uncertainty. The documents had moved those questions beyond customer complaints and into the center of Meta's business model. Reuters then tested the system. A reporter created an investment advertisement offering a 10% weekly return, a promise that would compound to an implausible annual gain. The test collected no investments. Respondents were told the offer was not real. The reporter contacted agencies in Meta's partner network and found intermediaries willing to place prohibited cryptocurrency ads for fees and a share of spending. Once the advertisement entered Meta's tools, the platform reportedly suggested alternate wording intended to improve performance and offered to test versions automatically. The ad became active and reached more than 20,000 users across several countries. More than 100 clicked, and more than 36 made inquiries. One American respondent said he had been awake searching for work. A person under financial pressure had encountered an impossible promise through a platform used every day. Meta removed ads and accounts after Reuters presented its findings. The company also emphasized that fraud occurs across dating services, messaging applications, cryptocurrency platforms, and the wider internet. The FBI recorded 859,532 internet crime complaints in 2024 and $16.6 billion in reported losses. People over 60 reported nearly $4.9 billion in losses, more than any other age group. Those totals cannot be attributed entirely to Meta, but social platforms can provide the first contact, targeted message, or borrowed credibility that moves a victim into a private conversation. After the Reuters report, 2 United States senators asked the Federal Trade Commission and Securities and Exchange Commission to investigate if the reporting proved accurate. Their letter was not a legal finding, but it made the internal calculation a federal regulatory question. Civil cases followed. The Consumer Federation of America filed a proposed class action in Washington, D.C., alleging that Meta misled users about its protection from scam advertising. Santa Clara County later filed a California civil action seeking restitution, penalties, and changes to business practices. The county alleged Meta knowingly facilitated and profited from scam ads, relying on the Reuters reported documents. Meta said it would defend itself and argued that the claims distorted its motives and ignored its enforcement work. As of July 2026, those allegations had not produced a final judgment establishing liability. There was no bankruptcy, shutdown, or executive removal. The point of no return was reputational. Meta could no longer describe scam advertising only as an outside attack without answering questions about its own thresholds, prices, strike allowances, and revenue estimates. Meta's response after the investigation was substantial. The company said it removed more than 159 million scam ads in 2025, with 92% taken down before users reported them. It also said it removed 10.9 million Facebook and Instagram accounts associated with criminal scam centers, expanded advertiser verification, introduced new warnings, used facial recognition against impersonation scams, sued fraudulent advertisers, and worked with law enforcement. In June 2026, Meta and partner organizations announced the disruption of more than 1 million online assets connected to Southeast Asian scam networks, alongside arrests by Thai police. These actions show the company can make criminal operations more expensive. They sharpen the original question. If major reductions became possible after public exposure and regulatory pressure, how much could have been prevented earlier, when employees, victims, and internal reports were already describing the vulnerabilities? The documents did not prove that every suspicious advertisement was fraudulent. They did not establish that Meta's chief executive personally approved individual scams, and they did not produce a criminal conviction against the company. What they revealed was structural. Meta could estimate risk, score advertisers, count strikes, raise auction prices, model penalties, forecast prohibited revenue, and set targets for reducing it. The company says those tools fought fraud while protecting legitimate businesses from mistaken removal. Critics and civil plaintiffs see a system that turned uncertainty into income and shifted the cost of delay onto users. The answer lies between intention and design. The scandal was not simply that criminals found a way into Meta's advertising network. It was that the network's rules could allow suspected criminals to remain paying customers while the company calculated how much stronger enforcement might cost. Return to Claire's stolen account. More than 100 reports, according to her estimate, did not restore control before trusted colleagues lost money. Now return to the $16 billion projection. Meta says that number overstated reality, and no public audit has confirmed it. Even a much lower figure creates conflict when the platform judging removal also receives the advertiser's payment. The broader lesson is that systems follow the incentives placed around them. When safety teams operate beside revenue guardrails, when suspicion changes price before it ends access, and when expected penalties are smaller than disputed income, protecting users requires rules that make prevention financially preferable to delay. At what point do you believe Meta crossed the line? When suspicious advertisers remained active, when they were charged more, or when prohibited revenue became a number to reduce gradually? Share your view in the comments, subscribe to Story Payoff, and stay notified.